Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of FFB from the 50. I am your host Dan Amsler, and Jason has made his long-awaited return. We want to talk some 2024 college football. Now, I've said before, and I mean it, Jason, I don't follow college football, I follow the pros. This is a fantasy football channel for me that we're filming for, but I rely on you and your expertise. Been to some college football, you cannot beat the atmosphere, but as far as following the games, it's a lot easier to follow 32 teams versus how many college football teams?
Like 120-something now.
Yeah,
and the
crazy.
expertise is much more loosely termed now because, just something I was thinking about on the way here. You know, a decade ago, I could feel pretty confident about rosters for 60, 70 teams. And with the transfer portal and everything else, it's incredibly difficult to know who's where. So, I mean, some of this is on the fly, you know, but it's not the same as it used to be. So.
Right. Well, and you mentioned the transfer portal. So we talked off camera a little bit ago. We were looking at the preseason rankings this year versus how the season ended for a lot of these teams last year. Washington's not even in the top 25 in either the AP or the coaches poll. And we were talking, you know, they lost their head coach. He goes to Bama. They lose their offensive coordinator. He's now the OC for the Seattle Seahawks. But, you know, what was their turnover in the transfer portal?
Like, a good majority of their team is gone.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know, 70, 80%. I know there might be a Washington guy or two here that can kind of say for sure. I felt bad that I don't know the number exactly, but it's a lot. So he can kind of chime in.
Yeah, let us know. So also, if you're watching this on the YouTube channel, Jason, we're live streaming this on your Facebook page.
Yeah, so we're trying to do a little bit of combo. So for the YouTubers that are following, that are looking like, hey, it looks a little down, like I'm trying to keep up with the Facebook if there's any questions that come in. In the past, we maybe tried to do some phone dialogue, but for tonight, I think it's just if you got a question or some comments, hit me up on Messenger, hit me up on the post down there. If you're watching on the Facebook live stream, you can even text me. I'll keep the dinger off, but I might not see it right away. But
right.
We'll dive in, man. You go where you want to go with it, and we'll talk some football.
So this is completely live or raw and unedited live on your Facebook. This is going to be a raw, unedited version on my YouTube channel, FFB from the 50, if you're interested. Typically a fantasy football channel, but we can't talk about fantasy football without talking college football. That's where these guys are coming from. So plus it's football.
That's right.
And football is just awesome. It's a great sport. The college game has changed. We've talked about the transfer portal as far as like Washington. We've seen other teams really utilize it. Colorado with Coach Prime, that comes to mind last year. So we're a little bit deeper into this. We're into the NIL. What are your takes on these things? How has that changed the college football landscape?
I think for a lot of programs, a lot of areas, personally right now, I think it's better. NIL especially. I know Nick Saban a few years ago made a comment like, well, it's only going to make the rich richer. And I think that was a cop-out way for him to say, I don't have the advantage anymore. And that's not a disparage towards Saban. I think that was the reality. But, like, you can't tell me right now when you look around, you're seeing some kids stay closer to home. You're seeing some other programs now that are getting things out of it. Ole Miss is a prime example. Like, the transfer portal for them this past year was unreal. Like, it's playoff or bust for them. Mm-hmm. They're not Alabama. They're not Georgia. They're not Ohio State. I mean, you know, again, 5 or 6 years ago, you wouldn't have maybe thought, you know, Ole Miss is a national title contender, and here we are.
I was going to say, they've opened up at number 6 in the AP coaches poll for the preseason. So the other thing, too, is I understand that argument. I get that. But as far as the rich getting richer, you got to look at the super conferences that are emerging, the Big Ten and the SEC. So, yeah, I mean, the rich are going to get richer, but when you look at these two super conferences, it's going to be a lot harder to come out of those conferences without having 3 to 4 losses on your record. I
think there's some of that. I think we were headed that way a long time ago. If Joe Sochurek is watching, I think he would kind of sentiment because he was in a negative way on that board a while back, but he wasn't wrong. I think... kind of thought maybe it'd be a little different, but that's just the state of where we're going. And again, I don't think it's a bad thing. I think if we get there and we get there fast, we're going to get games like already this year. Who is it? Texas and Michigan that are open up early in the season. I've got to cheat here a little bit because it's hard to keep track. Yeah, Texas and Michigan playing week 2. Well, if you don't have a 12-team playoffs and you don't have these mega conferences, I'm not saying that game doesn't happen, but there's far fewer of them.
Well, yeah, you can absorb a loss or two.
Yeah.
When, even during the BCS era, you couldn't do that.
And I think we've clearly seen from the previous playoff committee the ability to reward something there. So maybe for a Texas or Michigan, going 9-3 isn't a detriment because that game's on the schedule.
Right.
Whereas if they went 9-3 and they had a loss to someone else, not a quality loss. So I think getting these things in these games is better for everybody. And I know that's been on the schedule for a little while for them, but it circles back around to the fact that we're getting some fun games early in the season at a higher level than we have in the past.
Well, and I guess I would echo that sentiment, because at the end of the day, we want quality. I mean, you do have the Appalachian State upsetting Michigan.
They're not Ohio State. I mean,
I'm going to mute
5 or
this
6
real
years
quick.
ago,
I did not mean to do that.
So,
Ole
Miss is a national title.
There we go.
Yeah, so you get those upsets, but I would rather see the quality. I mean, those upsets are fun, but typically when you see a game like Michigan Appalachian State, you already know what the final's going to be, or what the result's going to be. At least now we're getting more competitive football. So I know that there's a lot of people that are against the super conferences. I know that there's a lot of people against the NIL, but for me, you're going to see the quality of the games increase, because again, they can have those games, and now that strength of schedule is really going to have to come into play. You get a team that comes out of the SEC with 2 to 3 losses. I mean, I'm sorry, but they're probably going to be better than the second best team from the ACC.
Yeah.
So, and I want to see, but you're right. They would not have taken those risks until all of this has changed. So.